Shalom and welcome to Return the Remnant Ministry. I'm Chad Wilhelm. Today we are continuing our study in the book of Revelation, the Hebrew book of Revelation. We're going to go into chapter 17 and 18 today, and I titled this Mystery Babylon. And we are going to see today the details of the event of Mystery Babylon, what happens to Mystery Babylon. And so John writes in chapter 17 and 18 the details concerning what happens to Mystery Babylon. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go ahead and read out of the Hebrew book of Revelation, and then I have a few things I want to discuss on this PowerPoint, and then I'm going to put a link in the description to a teaching I did a couple years ago for the Philippines, specifically on Mystery Babylon. So I'm hoping this will be a short video today, but I will put a link either on the screen for YouTube and or a description down, a link in the description at the bottom, probably for Brighteon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Revelation 17 verse 1. Then one of the seven messengers who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me and said, "Come, and you will be shown the judgment of the great harlot who sits over much waters, with whom the kings of the earth commit adultery, and those whom she makes drunk with her wine." So he brought me into the wilderness, and I saw the woman who sat on the animal, or the beast, whose appearance was like the appearance of lilies, and was full of names of reproach, and he had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was clothed in red garments with the appearance of lilies, and upon her there was much gold and goodly stones and gems, and there was a golden cup in her hand. Pay attention to the golden cup, full of uncleanness. And on her forehead was written the name of the secret of the great city Babel, the mother of the harlots and uncleanness of the earth. And I saw that the woman drank of the blood of the set apart ones, and of the blood of the testimony of Yeshua. And I had a great amazement when I saw her. But the messenger said to me, because of what do you have amazement? I want to tell you the secret of the woman and of the animal which she sits upon, and because of what he has 7 heads and 10 horns. The animal which you saw was, but is not, and will come again from the deep, but he will go to Sheol. Then the men of the earth will be amazed about him when they see the animal who was, but is not, although he is. And here is a word which needs insight and wisdom and understanding. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, which the woman sits upon, and these are 7 kings. And of them 5 are fallen, and 1 is, but the second is not yet. And when he comes, he must be for a little time. And the animal which was, but is not, this is the 8th, and he is of the 7, and goes to Sheol. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not received the kingdom, but they will rule as kings with the animal for a little time. And they have one plan, and they will give their power and their might to the animal, and they will make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him are the chosen ones and the believing ones. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, which the harlot sits over, are peoples and crowds and nations. And the 10 horns which you saw in the animal, they will be haters of the harlot, and they will make a desolation of her, and will eat her flesh, and with fire they will burn her. For Yahweh gave it in their hearts to do his will by giving her riches to the animal until the word of Yahweh is completed. And the woman which you saw is the great city, which reigns over all the kings of the earth. Chapter 18. And after this I saw another messenger descending from the heavens, and he had power and great might, and the earth shone with his light. And he cried out with all his power and said, Fallen, fallen has the great city Babel, and it became the dwelling of the Satans, and to hide all the unclean ones of the birds and creeping things. For all of them have drunk of her wine, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and all the merchants have become rich by her great desires. Then I heard another voice from the heavens, and it said, Go out of her, my people, that you be not punished with her because of her iniquities. For her iniquities have reached unto the heavens, and Yahweh, he will remember her. And as he did do to her, and repay her double, according to her works. And as she exalted herself and walked after her desires, according to this, make torments for her. For she thinks in her heart, I am a queen, I will not be a widow, and I will not see any suffering. But because of this, her sufferings will come in one day, the death and the suffering and the hunger, and she will be burned with fire, for mighty is Ha-Adon Yahweh, who will judge her. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication with her will be astonished over her when they see the smoke of the fire. And they will stand far away because of terror and will say, woe and alas, O great city Babel, your destruction came suddenly. And the merchants will weep and hiss over you, for no one will buy merchandise from them anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and goodly stones and gems and fine linen and all kinds of wood, all kinds of vessels of silver and iron and tin and lead and wine and oil and bread and wheat and bulls and sheep and horses and calves and neshamot of man. And the fruits which were to satisfy your ruach went away from you, and all the esteemed things went away from you, and you will not find them anymore. And the merchants who sold these things to her will stand far away and weep over her and say, woe and alas, the great city Babel, which was clothed with fine linen and with gold and with goodly stones and gems, for in 1 hour everything is laid waste. Your merchandise, your mariners and your ropemen, those who repair your breaches and those who trade your merchandise, and all the men of your war will stand far away, and they will cry out when they see the smoke and say, who is like this great city? And they will cast dust over their heads, crying out and weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe to the great city Babel, for by her all the merchants who had ships in the sea were made rich by her merchandise. And now in 1 hour everything is laid waste. Rejoice, O heavens, and his set apart ones and his prophets, for Yahweh has avenged their vengeance against her. Then one messenger took a great stone like a millstone and cast it into the sea and said, so will Babel sink and will rise up no more. And there will no more be heard in her the voice of joy and the voice of gladness, the voice of a bridegroom and the voice of a bride, nor any equipment of the skilled workers. Also the sound of millstones will no more be heard in you, neither will the light of the light sources shine in you anymore. For your merchants were princes over the earth, for by your sorceries they deceived all the peoples, and in her was found the blood of the set apart ones and prophets, and of all those who were killed on the earth. And thus ends our reading there. I wasn't real impressed with the translation of chapter 17 and 18. But a couple things I wanted to share with you that stood out for me in this translation was the fact that we always read in our Bibles, Mystery Babylon. That Babylon is what the wording is in most of our English translations of Revelation. However, in here, the Hebrew is Beit Lamed, Babel or Bavel. And every single time that I read in here and I looked for the word, each time it wasn't Babylon, it was Babel or Bavel. So I thought that was interesting. And it led me to Genesis 11, which we'll get into in just a minute. Let's see. I'm going to go to my notes now, and from here on out, I'm going to use some of the words out of the New Revised Standard Version to help make sense of some of the stuff that I read today. But again, if you want to get into who Mystery Babylon is, hint, hint, it is end-day Jerusalem, and it can be proven through Scripture. For instance, there's only one city that received double punishment for her sins, and that was Jerusalem. You can find this in the Tanakh, and I'm pretty sure I go through it in the teaching that I will list on here at the end. Also, there's this golden cup that we read about in Revelation, that Jerusalem has a golden cup. And then there's several places within Revelation where the Antichrist is ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. It's where the Messiah was crucified. It's also where the two witnesses will be killed. So several things point to end days Jerusalem, not now, but end days Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon. She is called a city several times. I could go on and on, but it's just going to be a lot easier to watch that presentation on Mystery Babylon, and you won't be disappointed with it. So let's get into this. So some key words, some key takeaways when you're reading chapter 17 and 18. And just like in Revelation 13:1, this beast that came out of many waters, it's a Hebrew idiom meaning coming out of many nations or out of many peoples or kingdoms. Well, Mystery Babylon rules over many waters, or she sits on many waters, if you will. She is the city, end days Jerusalem, that is the economic superpower hub of the world, where the Antichrist will rule and reign from. So many waters, meaning many nations, peoples, kingdoms. The woman, every time we read in here, when we see the woman is Mystery Babylon or Mystery Babel, that great city, meaning end times Jerusalem. This is going to be where the Antichrist will rule and reign from. So every time you see woman in Revelation 17 and 18, it is speaking of the city. She is as a woman, as a bride, if you will. Just like we read later in Revelation that the New Jerusalem is going to come down as a bride from heaven. The beast. Now I know in this translation it says the animal, but we're all accustomed to the beast. And the beast is in this masculine form. It's always going to be a he, him, his. He. And it's interesting when you're reading in 17 and 18, when it talks about the beast, where it says that he has 7 heads and 10 horns, you know right away this is the Antichrist, because we just read a couple weeks ago, Revelation 13:1, and I saw a beast, okay, the Antichrist, the beast, rising out of the sea or out of many waters, out of the nations, having 10 horns and 7 heads. We have right here 7 heads and 10 horns. So this beast is still the Antichrist. So keep that in mind, because when we get to the 5 kings, the 7, the 8, it's gonna make more sense when we get there. This is always trip people up, and I'm not saying I'm 100% correct, but I think this is the best fit when we get to that in just a second. So the woman is the great city, Mystery Babylon, end times Jerusalem. She sits on the many waters, meaning that she is in control of all the kingdoms of the earth. And that beast is what rules over her. He's the Antichrist. He's sitting in the temple, if you will, proclaiming to be God. You know, not the true God, but he's going to deceive many. And he'll have the full authority of Hazatan. And then when we're reading that great city that's full of prostitution, or the woman that is fornicating or a whoring, those type of words all can be spiritual adultery, which is idolatry. That she is promoting idolatry, and especially when the Antichrist sits in the tabernacle or wherever he is going to be at, sitting on the Ark of the Covenant, whatever it could be, proclaiming himself to be God. That is total blasphemy. That is idolatry. When they set up this image, and that people have to bow down to it, just like Nebuchadnezzar's image, that is idolatry. It's just another form of it. One thing I saw when I was going through this is some patterns, and many people who are Hebrew rooters, Messianic, that have gone through the Torah several times and have read a lot of the Tanakh. We see some patterns and some things I think are interesting. You know, when we look at Revelation and we see, you know, this is going to be at the end of the age, and many people are going to fall for the Antichrist. One story that I get back in the Torah is Genesis 10 and 11. You know, Genesis 10 is kind of the League of Nations, if you will. They're all the descendants of Noah and his family. And then we get a little bit of history where people's, people are procreating, and now we have nations and peoples, and we know that, Nimrod back in Genesis 10 was probably the first quote unquote king, of the earth at that time. And here we see in Genesis 11 the Tower of Babel. And this is why I'm kind of going to it, because when I read in here, every time it's that great city Babel. And I think I made a connection, at least in my opinion, JMO, I guess. I have here on my notes that the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, we have an account of that. And it said that all the earth had one language. And we're getting to the point right now with the internet and with AI and cell phones and everything else, where people in their own language can still come together and talk through interpreters, talk on their cell phone, and have someone talk in English and have it translate into Hebrew or any language out there. And so we're getting back to that point of one language. Then we see the people in Genesis 11 say, let us build a city with a tower. You could call that a stargate, a staircase. I'm sorry. I was going to say Stargate, but like a portal, if you will, and make a name for ourselves. And so the theme of this story in Genesis 11 is that this is an outright rejection of God. And they wanted to do what they wanted, and they wanted to build something so that if God ever decided to flood the earth, which we know he's not going to, he said it. That's why we have the covenant of the rainbow. They wouldn't destroy it again with water. But they thought, hey, if I build a tower that's high enough, then, if we're disobedient again, God can't judge us. So then we read later in Genesis 11, God sees what they're doing on the earth, and he comes down to judge mankind, and then he scattered them in the languages. And this is why, everyone's around the world now. We've got, several hundred different languages around the earth. And then it says the key words that caught me the other day was, and they left off building the city. What city? Babel. They left off building the city. It wasn't destroyed, so to speak, but it wasn't finished. And I believe that Revelation 17 and 18 is the final. It is Revelation is the rebuilding of what they left off, and then the final destruction that God is going to do on the world and on that city. So I have in here, therefore it was called Babel, confusion. That's what Babel means in Hebrew, is confusion, because Yahweh confused the language of all the earth. So just something to chew on there. I just thought it was kind of a dot connection when I read this part in the scripture where it says, and they left off building the city. We also know in the Torah, the Exodus account, where we have something similar to Revelation, where Pharaoh would be thematically connected to the Antichrist. Israel is afflicted or persecuted in Pharaoh's kingdom, leading up to the judgments of Yahweh through the plagues of the two witnesses, right? Aaron and Moshe in this case, and then the ultimate deliverance of Yah's people as they come out of Egypt and then cross through the Sea of Suf and destroy Pharaoh's army completely. So we have that story that's very similar. And then later in the Tanakh, we read in Jeremiah 51, and I would strongly encourage you after this teaching to go back and read, after you've read the destruction of Babylon here in Revelation 17 and 18, to go back to Jeremiah 51 and read it, because it talks about the fall and destruction of Babylon in Babylon, if you will. But it's not just only a historical account of what happened, but it's prophetically linked to the end days Babylon that we read about today. So keep that in mind as you go through and read Jeremiah 51. So a couple things I wanted to share And I'm going to read it out of my translation. This one, the New Revised Standard Version, because this trips people up, and I could be wrong with this too, but I'm going to give you the most logical explanation, if you will. In Revelation 17, I'll start back in 7 just to get context. When I saw her, so this is being the woman who is Mystery Babylon, aka End Days Jerusalem, I was greatly amazed. But the angel said to me, why are you so amazed? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. So we already know the woman is end times Jerusalem, and the beast is the Antichrist. Okay. He's the one that rules and reigns from that city. Now, verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Also, they are 7 kings, of whom 5 have fallen. 1 is living, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain only a little while, 1260 days. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. So I'm going to stop there. So I have on here in my notes, 5 kings have fallen. So back in John's day when he was writing it, there were 5 past kings that had fallen. Now, whether that could be Nimrod, if he was listed as a king, possibly, I don't know. Pharaoh of Egypt, he certainly was a king that afflicted Israel. Sennacherib was a king of Assyria who took away the northern kingdom of Israel. We have Nebuchadnezzar, who of Babylon, who took away the southern kingdom of Judah. Possibly Antiochus Epiphanes could be one. I don't know, but there were 5 kings, and I believe those 5 kings are already listed in the Tanakh as kings that John knew, that the angel was sharing with him, that, hey, 5 kings have fallen. So I could be wrong on that, but 5 of them have already fallen. They're dead. They're gone. Okay. One is. So whatever the prominent king that was ruling on the earth during John's day, maybe it was an emperor of Rome, maybe after Nero, Domitian, I'm not sure. I'd have to go into the historical books to see. We think that John wrote this around 96, 98 AD, somewhere in there, the mid 90s of the Common Era. So whatever the prominent emperor / king that was ruling on the earth during John's day would have been the one that is. And then it says the other is yet to come. And the other that is yet to come is going to be the future Antichrist. So now Revelation 17:11 says, and the beast, remember, every time we see the beast is speaking of the Antichrist. And the Antichrist that was and is not, okay? So he was, so he was alive, is not, he died, but even he is the 8th and is one of the 7 and goes into perdition, goes to hell, however you want to look at that, okay? Let's look at this again. Revelation 17:8. The beast that you saw, the Antichrist that you saw was and is not, meaning he died. Could it be the mortal head wound that we read about in Revelation 13? And shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, which looks to me like some form of a resurrection. And then he eventually will go into perdition. That's the way I see it. Now, some people will say, when you look at Revelation 17:8, when it says, and the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go into, some people say, well, that's Apollo. He's going into Apollo. And back in Revelation, let me go to it real quick. Revelation 9, I think, where it talks about the king that was over the bottomless pit, and his name was Apollyon. Go into Apollo, Apollyon. Well, maybe that's right. Maybe because in the Hebrew it's Abaddon. Maybe we're onto something. But I did a little researching on it, and this word here, where it says "and goes to destruction," is Apolleia or Apollia, which, according to Apollia, several times in the New Testament, if it's something worthless or nothing or a state of ruin or a state of destruction. Okay, that is what it means. It's similar, but not the same as Apollyon, which means the destroyer. So very similar, but not the same. So I think that type of study about this Antichrist going into the bottomless pit and going into Apollo, number one, it doesn't fit the timeline with Revelation 9 and this king over them coming out, but I mean, again, I could be wrong here, but to me, what makes the most sense is there's 5 kings of the 7. There's 5 kings that are already dead in John's day, one that was in John's day, that makes 6, and one that is yet to come, that makes 7. And of the one that is to come, he's going to die. Some type of resurrection is going to happen because people are going to marvel after this mortal head wound. And then, so he is now going to be alive again, meaning that he is not only the 7th, but the 8th. Okay. And then after a short period of time, 1260 days, however we see this, he will then eventually be destroyed and thrown into hell. That's kind of what I see with that. So understand that when you're looking at this in Mystery Babylon, again, the many waters that she sits on is that she's the city that's basically the capital of the world, if you want to look at it this way. And you're going to see all these merchants are going to be rich off of her. And why is that? Because the temple, there's going to be so much of goods coming into this temple, this tabernacle, whatever it may be, that's situated on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. All the riches of the world are going to be flowing to this place because everyone's going to be worshiping those that haven't taken the mark. Those that, let's put it this way, those that have taken the mark of the beast, they are going to be the ones who are going to be worshiping and promoting this beast, this Antichrist. So I hope some of that stuff helped today. Again, I'm going to put links in the description and also on the screen for the teaching on Mystery Babylon, where I go in specifically to explain that Mystery Babylon can be none other than end days Jerusalem. Until we meet again, may you have a blessed week. Shalom.